My name's Sam Moss, and I'm going to be sharing a few tips today about writing an author bio. The author bio is a small part of submitting and publishing, but it's not to be discounted. So, when you submit a piece of work to a venue or a press, the work itself should speak to its own quality and should determine whether that piece gets accepted or not. The author bio is going to have a pretty minimal impact on that, but it is usually expected, and it shouldn't be too hard to put a good one together. um, but it does take a modicum of effort to create a good author bio, and if you don't do it right, it has a chance to give an editor or reader or whoever maybe the wrong sense of who you are. So I wouldn't put too much stock in it, but hopefully these few tips I'm going to share could help you either improve your author bio or help you write an author bio for the first time. Um, and might there's a small chance that might tip you over into getting a publication. So, a little bit about me. My name's Sam Moss. I'm a writer. I've published in a number of venues, and I've published a novel called The Velt Institute, and we'll look at my author bio at the end of this video. And one thing about writing the author bio is it does tend to be fairly subjective. There is a lot of wiggle room, but I'm providing these tips from my experience, partially as a writer that I've learned, over the years, but also as an editor who reads a lot of submissions and a lot of author bios. So I edit an online journal called Ergot. I read the slush myself, and I see a lot of author bios, and a lot of the ones that come in are really great. But from time to time, I read things, and a lot of author bios can be confusing, or folks do things that kind of might turn me off from their work. It's never a deciding factor, but hopefully these tips can maybe help you out. Again, since this is subjective, you can take all of this with a grain of salt. You can always do whatever you want, and if you disagree with these, that's certainly a prerogative. And editors too will differ. Some might feel differently than myself, but these are some things to take into mind and to compare with your own feelings and maybe what you hear from folks that you share work with and so on. So the goal of the author bio, there are essentially two goals. So when you submit the piece, obviously the editor is going to read it. Most venues, at least what Ergot does, and I think most other venues, they're probably going to skip over the author bio and they're going to read the piece first. They want the piece to be the primary deciding factor, and maybe they'll read the author bio at the end, but a good venue is not, or good readers or editors are not going to let the author bio sway them too much. But if someone does read the piece and they don't know who you are, which is very common, they might want to learn a little bit more about you. And so, you'll put your name obviously in the author bio. But one thing that you can do, and that's generally accepted, is to tell the editor what it is that sets you apart from other submitters. And this usually includes the accomplishments that you have. So publications, degrees in the creative writing field. One other big thing that you might include in there is if there's some element of the story that requires specific or technical knowledge. So let's say you read a story about a geologist, or that includes some information about geology, and you yourself work as a geologist or have a degree in geology, you could include that in there to let them know that you're not just making this stuff up. So then if the story is accepted and published, then the author bio can function as well to let a reader who likes your piece know where they can find more of it, right? So I'm sure we've all had this where we're reading a story in a venue. We really, really like it. We think the story is super great, and we want to read more. And we go to the author bio, and maybe it says so-and-so lives in this state, and that's all. and there's no way to find that author. And you either have to go online and try and Google them or search for them some way. And maybe you can find other work, but it'd be great if there was some way to just go to an author website or social media for that writer. So it can be useful in that way as well. Now, this isn't strictly required, but it benefits everyone, right? The reader reads the story and they like it, then they can go find more. If you write a story that people like, then those readers can go and find more of your work. And the more of your work that's read, the better. So I'm going to break this down into some do's and some don'ts, and then a third category of things that are kind of in a gray area that can be done but need to be approached with some caution or some foresight. So the do's. The very basic element of the author bio is just going to have your name and location. And your name can be your legal name, or it can be some modification of your legal name if, let's say, you want to distinguish yourself from another writer that has a similar name. Or, of course, you could put your pseudonym in there if you use a pseudonym. So, for instance, my name's Samuel Moss. I usually go by Sam, but because there are a few other people named Sam Moss, writers and non-writers that have a big presence online, I like to distinguish myself by going by Samuel M. Moss. Now, no one would ever call me that, but it allows me to use that name to distinguish my work on the internet. Location isn't strictly required, but you can say what state you live in, what area, what country. And this can give folks some context as to where you're writing from. Again, not strictly required, but something you can put in there. A lot of us are determined by where we live, whether it's a country or a continent or whatever. There is the concern over people finding you and stalking online, so you wouldn't want to put your full address here, obviously, but, state or city if you think that's important. So the big one is going to be what makes you stand out. So the things in this category are going to be publications. And the two things that I see as an editor that usually rub me the wrong way are people who say, I've been published in 50 venues. Now, that's great, but it doesn't really tell me a whole lot, or it doesn't tell the editor a whole lot. Editors are very interested in authors who have been published in venues that publish works similar to their own. So, for instance, Ergot publishes experimental horror. And if I see that someone has published work in venues that are similar in tone to Ergot, that can tell me that they probably have a good idea of the kind of work that we publish and the scene as a whole. If I look in there and the person hasn't really published in any Ergot adjacent venues, is maybe published in some places that have nothing to do with Ergot, that might make me either a little wary and worry that this person doesn't really know the kind of work that we publish, or on the other hand, it could be very interesting to have someone who, let's say, publishes traditional realist literary fiction kind of branching out into the kind of work that Ergot publishes, which is very different from that. I would say that the general rule is to put in the three latest, or maybe 3 to 5 most significant publications that you've had. It's up to you which you think are most important. I mean, if you've been publishing for 30 years, it's usually a good idea to include places that you've published within the last couple years. If you've only started publishing recently, you can include all. Let's say you've only published in 3 places, you can include all 3. And if you've published in a wide range of places, and let's say you're very proud of a couple, then you can include those as long as they're fairly recent. There are some exceptions to this, and I'll get to those in the don'ts. But other things that might make you stand out, any degrees in creative writing or literature, right? So you're going to focus on things that are related to writing. If you have a degree in electrical engineering, that's great, but unless it's relevant to the story, you probably don't want to include it. And, if you've won awards, that's certainly worth putting in here. If you've won a Pulitzer or a pushcart prize, or anything like that, by all means list it in here if that's something that you're proud of and you think it stands out. So publications and other accomplishments. And then the last big thing, and really the author bio should be short and sweet. Usually you'll see word counts around maybe 50 to 150 words. Links to social media or your author site. So if you do have your own author site included in here, if you don't have an author site but you have social media and that's where you're posting your publications and things like that, then put in links to the social media. Pretty short, pretty sweet, pretty simple. I'm going to go over my author bio at the end so you can see what this looks like. So the things that you generally don't want to do. So leaving credits vague. So if you just put a number, like I mentioned before, it doesn't really tell us a whole lot. If you say you've published in various or 30 or 100 other venues, it really doesn't tell the editor anything. You can include that at the end. You can say so-and-so has published in Plowshares, Nightmare, Lightspeed, among many other, or among 50 other venues. That's totally fine. But at least give us some idea of where you've published or what you think is relevant to the place that you're submitting now. You can always have multiple author bios, right? So I have one author bio that I use when I'm submitting to more genre-oriented magazines or publications that include genre-oriented publications that I've had. One for more literary publications, and then another for the few times that I submit poetry that include my poetry credits. So the other thing you don't want to do is include every single publishing credit, or really more than 5 to 7 publishing credits. These things can be included on your author website or somewhere more centralized. And if an editor wants to see every place you've published, then they can go there. But including them in the author bio is not really going to impress anyone, and it's going to overwhelm anyone who is interested in seeing where you've published with just a lot of spurious information. So then the last thing is irrelevant information. So there's this big category of things that are certainly worth being proud about as a writer, but don't really merit being included in the author bio. So, and this might be a matter of taste, but I really think that just being nominated for a prize isn't worth including in an author bio. You see these all the time and they don't really mean anything. I mean, it's great, like you should feel proud about it, but including it in the author bio doesn't really say anything. You were nominated, that's great, but you didn't win. People who have won awards, now that's notable and that's rare, and that's certainly worth including in the author bio. And again, these things like nominations, by all means, include them in your author website or even social media. But on the author bio, it's just not really something that should be included. Other things like just information about your pets or your hobbies. This is great stuff, and maybe you could include it on your author website for people who are interested in you specifically. But for a submission, this really isn't relevant to the editor or the reader. So, if you're big into flying drones, that's great. But it doesn't have anything to do with the story, of course, unless the story is about drones. So, in general, if you want to project a professional image in your author bio, you kind of want to treat it like you would like a resume or a CV. It doesn't have to be quite as wooden, but think about it in those terms. Like if you were submitting a resume or a CV to a job, would you include like the name of your cats or your spouse or your favorite restaurant or things like that? And the answer would be no. Now, there are probably some editors and readers out there who appreciate that. But I think for the most part, most serious editors and venues are just going to think that it seems a little inappropriate or just don't really see the point of it. So, as far as matters of taste, so nominations, like mentioned before, just keep it on your author site, but probably not worth including in the bio itself. Hobbies and extracurriculars, if you really think that this is an important part of your writing, go ahead. But for the most part, if it doesn't have to do with writing, it just seems like it's not worth including in a 150 word bio. The last one is writing the bio in style. So some people will write the bio in character or try and make it kind of like kooky or fun. And, it's kind of a double edged sword. Like that might work well at some venues, but at a lot of venues, people who take writing really seriously, like this might kind of fall flat or not kind of have the professional air that you might be looking for. I tend to just kind of take a dim view of it at Ergot, but there are probably folks out there that think it's great. So just good to play it by ear and just make sure that you're including the right things for the right venue. So I'm going to finish off by just going over my current author bio. So I've got my name. Since I do write and edit, pretty heavily both, then I put that in there. If you don't edit, then you can exclude this. But if you're a publisher or have some other role in the writing world, by all means include that here. I've put the general area where I live. Again, optional, but it tells people that I'm from the Pacific Northwest. My first credit is a novel that came out this year. And generally, you'll see that where, bigger works like novels and novellas are going to come first, and then shorter works are going to come after. Again, it's just a matter of taste, but, you kind of foreground the things that you think are most important. These are links, and, some venues are going to be able to link to things. Obviously, if this is a print publication, it wouldn't. Sometimes they'll let you know if that's something that's possible or how they want that formatted. But go ahead and keep an eye out for that, because now, if someone sees this, they read it and they think it's interesting, they can just click on that link and it'll take them to the book. So, and then this is so obvious, at least it seems so obvious to me that I haven't even mentioned it yet, but the author bio should be written in the third person. So even though I wrote this about myself, it's written as if someone else has written it, right? So say, Samuel M. Moss, he is the author. I don't say I am the author. This is a convention, but it's sort of an accepted convention, and you can go against it at your own risk. I wouldn't recommend it. I would stay in the third person. So then, yeah, I've listed here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 venues. So this is kind of a mix of, just some venues that I'm proud of and that kind of show the breadth of my work. And this is really up to taste. But and then you can tailor this to where you're publishing, things like that. But I would say like more than 7. I would say 7 is probably the limit. At a certain point, whoever's reading this is probably just going to space out. But then, yeah, you can say among other venues. If you really want to let people know that you've published in a lot of places, you can say, among other venues, at other places, 50 other venues, 100 other venues, 100 other magazines, etc. That's another link. And then, the last thing that I put in here, so because I edit Ergot, I put this in here with a link to it. And then, yeah, so this doesn't have a link to my personal site, but you could also do something like, to find more, go to, right, and that's my author site. But you could just do, your name here.com. So that's pretty much it, right? I mean, this is 70 words. It gets everything across. And, the main point is if someone does want to learn more about you, if they want to learn about you as a writer, this is kind of the teaser or the doorway. And then they can go through this to your social media or your author site. So thanks for watching. I hope this helps you out. Again, these are suggestions from my experience. Take everything with a grain of salt and tailor it to your experience, and do what you find works for you. But I hope you found this helpful. Thanks.